So this is for the subject investment and portfolio management. The topic is risk return trade-off. So here you have an article from Investopedia.com. Alright. So ano ba yung risk return trade-off? So di ba sa investments nga, meron siyang kaakibat na risk. And of course, di ba yung principle natin is that the higher the risk, the higher the possibility of return. So kung low lang yung risk, the possibility of return is also low. Okay? Pero again, you have to, as an investor, hindi naman, porque aggressive investor ka, you're going to take on as much high risk investments as you can. So hindi naman syempre. So you have to make an analysis as well. Kasi meron types of investment na higher risk, pero yung pagiging high risk kasi nila is to the point na kita mo na agad na yung possibility niya is more on the losing side compared dun sa maging profitable siya. Okay? Kasi merong mga tinatawag tayo na junk investments or, tipong junk bonds or junk stocks na yung mga companies na yon is kumbaga malapit na mag-bankrupt or yung performance nila is in recent years, talagang losses na, yung mga makikita mo sa financial reports nila. And the only reason they're offering high returns is to attract new investors nga. Or, funding for them to be able to continue their operations. Na if they don't offer kasi yung high return na yon, possibility of high return, is that more likely than not, wala na mag-invest sa kanila. And then if that happens, then they can no longer continue their operations. Okay? So in that sense, if you are an experienced investor, more likely than not, you're no longer going to, go after such companies unless makita mo na meron pa naman talaga siyang potential na makarecover or makabawi sa kanilang operation. So in that case, yes, it's probably going to be, profitable or it's going to give you high returns kapag nag-invest ka sa kanila or you provided them with the funds. Okay? But then again, kailangan, i-analyze or kailangan tingnan mo pa rin ng maayos, yung kanilang financial performance or yung kanilang potential pa rin to recover. Kasi kung hindi mo naman makita yung mga yon, hindi mo makita na may possibility pa bang maka-recover to, baka yung maipon nila na additional funding is gamitin lang nila pambayad ng utang, right? And then, of course, andun pa rin yung other risk na baka mamaya hindi to makalikom ng sapat for their operations, baka mamaya maipon lang nito is sapat pang bayad ng loans, sorry, pambayad ng liabilities, pero yung to continue their operations or to innovate their products or to improve their services, baka hindi nila magawa. So in that sense, it's probably not worth it to invest in those companies regardless of the promise ng high returns. Okay? Kasi kumbaga, yes, high returns, pero kung may kakayanan ka ba na ma-realize yung high returns na yan when the time comes. Or baka mamaya, empty promise lang yan. Okay? So, andun din yung possibility ng ganon. So, in that sense, again, if you're an experienced investor, you're not going to simply invest in that because they promised a high return. Okay? Because again, although company, syempre, hindi naman yan magpa-promise or hindi naman yan magbabanggit nung, the other side losses, the possibility of losses. So what they normally say is, of course, you could probably gain this much profit. Okay? Pero if you know about investments, yung reverse nun is that you could also lose this much. Okay? If you invest in us. So, marang ganun. And you have to, again, measure and evaluate and find a balance in your portfolio. Na for this particular investment, if you get this high risk investment, mako-cover ba yan or mababalance out ba yan yung other investments mo in your portfolio? Okay? So, yan. Dun papasok yung risk-return trade-off natin. Na hindi naman porke high risk yan at hindi naman porke nag-promise ng high return yung isang investment or yung issuer niya is kakagatin mo na agad. Diba? You have to make your analysis and evaluation pa din. Okay, and then you have to, itong trade-off ng risk and return. Makatarungan ba or justified ba yung hinihingi nila na investment for particular or for the rate of risk and the return na meron yung kanilang company. Of course, they would provide you with a percentage of the return, the possibility of return. But hindi mo naman siya i-take at face value, di ba? You still have to do your own analysis of their financials to see kung yan ba talagang return na pinangako nila is, yun nga, may kakayanan ba silang ibigay yan. Or makita mo dun sa financials nila, lubog na pala sila sa utang, and most likely than not, hindi nila mabibigay ang return na yan. And most likely din, baka i-absorb lang nila yung investment mo. Maubos lang sa kanila, okay? Na hindi naman sa'yo mabibigay yung return. So, ayun. And again, you have to look into the type of investment din. Kasi nga, pag stocks yan, part owner ka, pag nalugi, most likely than not, hindi mo na ma-recover yan. Unlike bonds, normally kasi pag bonds, tapos na-bankrupt yung company, andun ka sa, kumbaga may higher priority ka with regards to being paid back, compared to the company owners. Okay, so ayan. So yung risk-return trade-off, it states that the potential return rises with an increase in risk. So with this principle, individuals associate low levels of uncertainty with low potential returns and high levels of uncertainty or risk with high potential returns. According to the risk-return trade-off, invested money can render higher profits only if investor will accept a higher possibility of losses. Okay? Bakit nga ba merong mga companies na, tagilid na yung kanilang financials pero they still try to attract new investors by offering high returns? Okay, so again, one point is that wala naman kasing investor na mag-invest sa kanila if they don't offer a high rate of return. Okay, but then again, on the part of the investor, you have to check, may kakayanan pa ba yung company na yan na maka-recover and to deliver yung pinramis nila na high return. Okay? Because if they do, then it's actually, a good deal for the investor kasi essentially, of course, they're risking their money, and if they do well itong company na to, then they were going to get back their money and the return that was promised. Okay? But again, that's only after evaluating or making an analysis and making sure that this company can still recover. Right? Okay, and then on the part naman ng mga companies na nag-offer lang ng low returns, essentially their risk is also low. So, kumbaga justifiable na low lang din yung rate of return na kanilang ina-offer. Let's say these are companies na, established na, and since they are established and they are performing well and that their financial is stable, kumbaga hindi kasi sila mahihirapan na maghanap ng investors. Kasi because, as a blue chip company, kumbaga, tao na mismo ang lalapit sa kanila para mag-invest. Kasi nga, meron silang track record na maayos naman yung kanilang performance, maayos naman yung kanilang operations, matagal na silang nag-ooperate, decades old na, centuries old na, ganyan. So, kumbaga, the investors, the public, are assured na this company is going to continue doing well into the future. So, low risk, low return, right? And then with regards to your portfolio, nabanggit niya natin kanina dun sa portfolio management na video, is that you have to make sure na yung different types of investments mo in your portfolio have varying degrees of risk or, varying levels of risk. Meron kang low risk, moderate risk, you have your high risk investments. Tapos, of course, they should come from different companies, different industries, and then you have a mix of, local and international companies if you can. And then make, asset classes, stocks, bonds, and then you have your real estate, other types of assets, derivatives, ganyan. Alright? So, ayun. So, nakadepende din, again, dun sa risk tolerance or risk appetite ng isang investor. Tapos, yung kanyang, investment horizon. Kasi kahit, let's say, conservative or moderate investor ka, so kung meron kang financial goal, let's say nga 1 million within 10 years, then most likely, you would be, suggested to take on more aggressive or more risky assets. Kasi nga, the riskier the assets, the higher the return that they provide. As long as, again, pinpoint mo ng maayos kung alin dyan sa mga risky assets na yan ang may high probability na babalik talaga yung pera at hindi kakainin sa losses ng company. Alright. Time also plays an essential role in determining a portfolio with the appropriate levels of risk and reward. For example, the investor meron siyang ability to invest in equities over the long term, provides an investor with potential to recover from the risk of bear markets. Bear markets yung kapag bumabagsak yung mga prices ng stocks or ng financial securities. And participate in bull markets. Yung bull markets naman, edi yung opposite, nagtataasan yung prices ng mga companies. While if an investor can only invest in a short time frame, the same equities have a higher risk proposition. Right? Investors use the risk-return trade-off as one of the essential components of each investment decision, as well as to assess their portfolio as a whole. At the portfolio level, the risk-return trade-off can include the assessments of the concentration or, diversification of various investments dun sa portfolio, and whether the mix represents too much risk or lower than desired potential for returns. Okay? But then again, it would depend on, type of investor ka, your financial goals, and then your financial horizon. Key takeaways, the risk-return trade-off is an investment principle that indicates that the higher the risk, the higher the potential reward. To calculate an appropriate risk-return trade-off, investors must consider many factors, including overall risk tolerance, potential to replace lost funds, and more. Investors consider risk-return trade-off on individual investments and across portfolios when making investment decisions. Okay. Normally, available siya on, an individual investment level. Pwede mo siyang i-compare dun sa market performance din naman. Okay? Tapos, ano pa nga isang babanggitin ko dapat, kalimutan ko na. Gosh! Short-term memory tayo ngayon. Naalala ko siya habang binabasa ko to. Tapos, nung binasa ko na siya up to this point, nalimutan ko. Ayan, naalala ko na. When it comes to investment, wala ka kasing masasabi na fixed rules. Kasi magde-depend siya on a lot of factors. Unang-una na nga, yung particular investor and yung risk tolerance niya. Okay? Anong type of investor ba siya? Conservative, moderate, or aggressive? And then, andun din yung possibility na maaaring hindi mag-jive yung type of investor to the type of investment na kukunin niya if you take into account yung kanyang financial goals. Kasi kung mayroon siyang financial goals na medyo, malaking pera, ang gusto niyang ma-achieve agad in a short amount of time, yung financial horizon naman niya, then it's possible na itong conservative investor would accept to, invest in risky investments or riskier securities. So, kumaga, wala kang mababanggit or wala kang masabi na for this particular situation is ito yung gagawin. Okay? Kasi it would depend on the investor who would take on the risk himself. Kung anong type of investments yung kanyang gagawin or kukunin or kung ano yung mga types of investments na gusto niya ilagay niya sa portfolio niya. So, it would depend on the investor essentially. Okay, so kumbaga, we can talk about this or can talk about all these things, pero at the end of the day, it's the investor's decision or individual decision kung anong gusto niyang gawin sa pera niya. Okay, but of course, again, you have these principles na guide natin kung ano ba yung dapat yung types of investments na swak sa atin or ano ba yung dapat natin gawin before we take on all these investments with high returns, di ba? High returns yung pinapromise nila, pero yung question nga natin is, do they have the capacity to deliver such promises? Or baka mamaya, kainin lang sa losses yung investments mo. have to be very careful then. Ano? Okay, special considerations, measuring singular risk in context. So when an investor considers high risk, high return investments, the investor can apply the risk return trade-off to the vehicle or portfolio on a singular basis as well as within the context of the portfolio as a whole. Okay? So yung vehicle is, individual investments or all the investments within a portfolio. Examples of high risk, high return investments, options, penny stocks, leverage, exchange traded funds. Ang ayoko kasi dun sa mga high risk, high return investments, it's akin to gambling na kasi. Di ba kasi ang gambling 50-50. 50% could win, 50% you could lose. So the higher the risk kasi, it's getting similar to gambling. But of course, when it comes to investments you have the capacity naman to analyze on whether the issuer or the company has the ability to back up their offers. Unlike do sa gambling na hindi mo naman alam kung ano itong mangyayari. Okay? So, here in investments, meron ko pang other things to consider before finalizing on your decision on whether to make the investment or not. And wala namang pumipilit naman sa'yo na mag-invest if you don't want to. Right? Generally speaking, a diversified portfolio reduces the risk represented by individual investment positions. Okay? So, for example, meron kang penny stock position or in small companies may have a higher risk on a singular basis, but if it is the only position of its kind in a larger portfolio, the risk incurred by holding the stock is minimal. Kumbaga, solo lang siya na penny stock, all the other assets in the portfolio are, other types of investments. So, hindi siya ganun kalaki yung yung kanyang impact in the overall portfolio. Risk-return trade-off at the portfolio level. That said, the risk-return trade-off also exists at the portfolio level. For example, a portfolio composed of all equities, stocks, presents both higher risk and high potential returns within an all-equity portfolio. So, dito yung portfolio niya, lahat stocks, Risk and reward can be increased by concentrating investments in specific sectors. So, siguro you can probably create a portfolio with, a certain sector or industry, as long as this industry could survive, whatever situation the economy is in. Yun nga, yung mga basic necessities or commodities ng tao, pangangailangan ng tao, basic needs. Or by taking on single positions that represent a large percentage of holdings. And for investors, assessing the cumulative risk-return trade-off of all positions can provide insight on whether a portfolio assumes enough risk to achieve long-term return objectives or if the risk levels are too high with the existing mix of holdings. Okay, so yan, kailangan i-check or monitor mo rin yung portfolio mo. Kasi baka mamaya, yung risk levels kasi nagbabago naman yan depending on the economic situation then. So, probably nung time na binili mo siya, hindi pa ganun kataas yung risk, but after particular situation occurred, biglang makikita mo, tumaas pala yung risk niya. So, you really have to monitor your portfolio, and so, to ensure din na yung particular risk appetite mo is nami-meet, or if you can cater more risk, na-adjust accordingly yung iyong portfolio or yung investments mo within your portfolio. Okay, so essentially yun yung discussion natin about risk-return trade-off. Nakadepend siya on many factors, right? So that's it for this one. Thanks and bye.